All right, let's dig into Aux Tracks. All right, so this video is a bit of a continuation on a recent video I did where I talked about the first few steps that I take while mixing. And today we're just going to talk about Aux Tracks and making Aux Tracks and how I decide how many and where to put them and stuff like that. But I'm not going to be talking about a list of mixed steps like I did in the previous video, but I'm calling this a continuation of the last video because it does tend to be the next step that I tend to take when I'm mixing. And I do kind of go all over the place sometimes, but this does tend to be one of the next steps. So I'm going to put a card for that previous video up on the screen if you haven't checked it out already. And we're going to talk about Aux Tracks. All right, so for this example, I have a bunch of stems that I basically exported out of Ableton and imported into Pro Tools to do a mix. So this is coincidentally in the early stages of mixing. So I think it's a good example for that reason. You can see a lot of these things are still like full stems. I haven't even edited them very much. But, and I've done a little bit of mixing, but not a ton yet. So the first thing I do that I mentioned in the other video is that I tend to organize my tracks by category, and I'll start with like the percussion all the way over to the right here, all the way up to like vocals all the way to the left here, and then I have my master fader on the left. So I talked about that in my previous video. But then what I tend to do is based on these chunks of tracks, I will make aux tracks for each chunk. So each thing that I deem as being a category will get aux tracks. And a lot of times I start with some very basic categories and then I get more specific as I go. So right now I have all my vocals going to an aux track. Later on in this process, I might have all of the lead vocals, what I deem the lead vocals, going to one aux, and then all the backing vocals going to another aux, for example. So this can evolve as I go. And before we go any further, I kind of just want to briefly talk about aux tracks. So aux tracks, they're just signal routing tracks, right? So they don't actually hold any audio themselves. If you look at an aux track, you can see it doesn't have a waveform option. It doesn't hold any audio. It doesn't hold any MIDI. It's just routing. So you're sending tracks or groups of tracks to the aux, and then that allows you to sum it, kind of like a submix in a way, and then send it on to somewhere else, right? So it allows you to sum everything together, put processing on a whole bunch of things at once. It can save you processing power. It can save you time. And it can kind of allow you to glue things together in a way that wouldn't happen if you put the same processing on individual tracks one by one. So that's kind of the general idea of what an aux track is. You'll also notice that an aux track has this symbol right here on it, as opposed to an audio track, which has this symbol, like the little waveform, or, you know, a master fader, which has the sum symbol here. So that's kind of the 101 on what an aux track is. And the thing that I tend to do when I'm creating aux tracks for mixing is I almost entirely will make stereo aux tracks. I almost never make a mono aux track. And that may or may not be the smartest thing ever, but I tend to make stereo aux tracks. And that's because a lot of times I'm doing a lot of panning automation, a lot of things with panning. I'm doing a lot of different things that I want when I'm summing a bunch of tracks together. I usually want it to be in stereo. So, and I want to see it in stereo. I want to process it in stereo. I want to work with it in stereo. So I create a stereo aux track. So to do that, I do Command Shift N to create a new track. And I hold Command and use the arrow keys to choose my options, right? So stereo aux input. And then I create that aux track. So now I have two right here. This one is not set up yet. So I'll set its output. I will also rename my aux track. So this one might be like vocals effects. If I could type, that'd be great. And so there are two main ways that I will route these chunks of tracks to an aux track. So this you can see is the first way. This is kind of the main way that I tend to do it. You'll notice this aux track is taking in bus 1, 2, because our input panel is the top, output panel is on the bottom. It's going out to my main, you know, left and right stereo bus. So it's taking in bus 1, 2, and you'll notice that all of these vocal tracks, they're all going out through their output panel through bus 1, 2. So that's what I do kind of for like the general aux tracks that are there to sum everything together, to see how they're all getting summed together, to process them all together before then going out to another submix or to the master fader. So that's kind of the primary way that I'll make an aux track. And then I also sometimes, depending on the instrument category or whatever it is, I'll add secondary, or even I'll add third or fourth aux tracks as well sometimes. But when I do these secondary ones, it kind of depends. Sometimes I'll do it the same way and I'll just let it take the same bus input, you know, do bus 1, 2. But sometimes what I'll do is I will shift and click to highlight a range of tracks, and then I'll hold Option Shift and I'll choose another bus to be a send. So I'm going to do 7 and 8 because it's not being used. I'm still holding Option and Shift, and then I'm clicking to bring it up to 0. And I'm just going to check that everything's at 0. Yeah. So all my buses are at normal, right? So they're all going out bus 7 and 8. And now I might set this one to take bus 7 and 8. And so it kind of depends on what I'm doing, but what this allows me to do is, for example, I could set these sends to be pre-fader, I could change their levels and have it be a slightly different output than this main bus 1, 2 for these vocals. So then I can process it differently. So a lot of times what I'll do is if I have something like this, where it's taking a send, or even if it's taking the bus 1, 2, honestly, a lot of times this stuff will be what I think of as more of the wet processing, right? So it might be like really heavy reverbs or delays or something that's kind of like more of an effecty type of thing and less of just like EQ compression, trying to make it pop out in the mix, trying to make it function in a more like dry, normal way. So that's a common way that I'll do it. And then I can easily, for example, if this has a really heavy, like let's say I put, I don't know, Valhalla Supermassive on it, right? That's a really big reverb sometimes. So let's say I have that, I can then really easily blend this in just using this aux fader instead of, you know, blending it in on individual plugins. And it also has the advantage of it's taking all of these and summing them together before sending it through that Valhalla Supermassive. So it's going to have a different effect than if I just put the Valhalla Supermassive on each track individually. So, and it's convenient, it's easy, I can blend it into the mix. I can automate this so it only goes up during like certain moments in the song to get more emotional impact or for a transition or something like that. I do that all the time. Me and automation are best buds. I love automation. It's tedious, but it's sometimes it's what you need to do to get your mix where you want it to be. So that's something that I commonly do. What else? I guess I could talk about how many aux tracks I tend to make per instrument. So with vocals, a lot of times I will have a main vocals. I might have a separate category for backing vocals. I'll have my main vocals aux that's kind of summing everything together and doing some standard stuff. And then I'll also have vocal effects. And then depending on the song, depending on how wild I'm getting with it, I sometimes will have 2 or 1 more aux track for vocals. So sometimes I have 3 or 4 aux tracks for vocals, but that depends on how much I'm adding in terms of effects and processing, how much fun I'm having with it. It's not always how much fun I'm having, but like I do have more fun when I add more processing. For things like synths and guitars and stuff like that, piano, keys, a lot of times I will have 1 to 2. So I'll have one that sums and then I'll have the effecty one. That's pretty common. Some things where it's like very heavy on guitars, like things where it's like atmospheric guitars and what you're really doing is just changing the texture over time. Sometimes I'll add a 3rd aux for something like that, and I'll kind of blend in and out different, you know, types of delays, types of reverb, stuff like that, just to kind of generate interest. And even if people don't consciously notice the difference over time, I feel like it helps keep the brain interested, keep the brain engaged, and keep people listening longer if there is if there are slight variations over time, if you do vary it as the song progresses. So that's something, I mean, I talk about that a lot here, but I'll do that. And one of the ways I do that is with aux tracks that have different types of effects on them and then automating those in and out. So let's see. So with bass, I tend to keep it really simple. I tend to just have 1 bass aux. I'll often have this pan center, so it's not stereo at all, right? A lot of times if we start stereoizing our bass or adding a ton of reverb to our bass, it can really make things a bit chaotic, a bit too much. So I tend to keep it pretty simple with the bass. Oftentimes I do more extreme compression on bass as well, but that's not the point. The point is we're talking about aux tracks here. So usually what I do is a lot of times my bass tracks will have, if there are more than 1 bass track, they'll have just 1 bass aux, and that's pretty common for me personally. This is kind of unusual how I have this pan. I'm kind of experimenting with it because this is early stages for the mix. There is a good amount of stuff going on with this bass, though, that isn't normally going on with other genres so much, like rock music and stuff. A lot of times the bass doesn't have as much going on inherently right off the bat. It's just, you know, what you add to it. So a lot of times I'll keep that very center panned and not a ton of reverb or anything like that. So often just have 1 bass aux. And then for drums, I tend to go wild with drums. Right now I just have 1 for this one, but a lot of times I'll have like 3 or 4 especially if they're room mics. Like if it's an acoustic drum recording and their overheads are room mics that were given to me, I will go wild with those because I really like the sound of room mics. Like, I mean, the Coles 4038s are like some of my favorite mics on drums as like overheads or room mics, and especially if there's something like that in there that sounds really nice, that's not too harsh. I'll have a lot of fun adding personality and character, especially by crunching that stuff or adding to that stuff and then automating it so it gets really loud at points to add to the drama or the intensity of the song. I like doing that. And I don't know, I'm kind of just talking in general, but again, it's another way to generate interest and keep people listening. And you can kind of, there's usually some kind of peak emotional point in a song, even, no matter what the subject matter and no matter what genre it's in. And so a lot of times at the peak moment, I like to bring up things like the noisy things like the room mics and the drums. And using my aux tracks is another way that I do that. So a lot of times my drum aux will have I'll have a ton of drum auxes. So I'll have a main one and I'll have a few effecty ones. And I'll play with those a lot. Yeah. And then the other thing that I'll have sometimes I don't have yet in this mix is I'll have like one or two aux tracks that are just for reverbs. So I might have, a short reverb and a long reverb, and I'll have a bunch of things across multiple types of instruments going to those short and long reverbs. And that kind of helps glue everything together and make it feel like it's all in the same space. So that's another thing that I'll do. And usually I'll put those kind of towards the head of the mix here near the master fader. And then when sessions get really complex and big, what I'll also sometimes do, and this is just for ease of making these final levels for the final mix, is I will make like I call them stem auxes. They're not really stems. And usually I don't add a ton to them. I don't add, if anything, I usually don't add anything to these aux tracks, but I'll have something like all the vocals aux will go to one vocal stem. And so then I'll have a bunch of stems here. I tend to make them purple, and I'll have a vocal stem aux, a guitar stem aux, a bass stem aux, drum stem aux, whatever's in the track. So I'll have, just for like the super basic instrument categories, I'll have another round of aux tracks that then funnel into that master fader. And that just kind of helps me see like how all these other aux tracks are summing together. Because if I have 3 or 4 aux tracks on the main vocals, then sometimes it can be hard to control that all at once. If I want to, for example, just bring all of the vocals across the board down ever so slightly, a lot of times at the end, I'm doing these small tweaks to levels to kind of try to make everything arrive at a good level that's not too crazy. And, I don't want to overcompress stuff either, right? So a lot of times it has to do with just like, volume automation essentially, or, what have you. I'm kind of talking in circles now. But the point is, it makes it much easier if I'm trying to get my levels for my final master fader to have just 3 or 4 auxes that I can then bring all of them down if I want everything to be a little bit quieter, but maybe in slightly different ways. Maybe I want the drums to stay where they are and I just want to bring everything else down slightly. It makes it faster and easier. And it's a pretty quick setup process, right? Like I just go click on my master fader, so it makes it right next to my master fader. I go Command Shift N, stereo aux, and maybe I'll do like 5 of them. And then I like to color them. So I like to make them purple usually. And then I might name them really quick. So like vocals, what do I have in here? Synths, etc. I did et instead of etc. What's after this? The bass, I think. Bass and then percussion. So it's pretty quick and easy to set up. And then what I would do is I'd get rid of this one because I didn't need it. I didn't plan ahead. And then what I'll do is I'll set inputs for all of these, right? I might set them all to their correct output first because this is defaulting to a slightly different one. So I might set buses for these, 9, 10, 11, 12, and so on. And then I'll go through and be like, vocals are 9, 10. So then I would set all of these vocal auxes to 9, 10 instead of output 1, 2. And then I'm done. It's quick, easy. And if I want to, for example, take all the synths down slightly, I can just do it right here. Or if I want to hear just the percussion and the vocals together and how they're blending, it's much easier and quicker to work with that way. So that's another way that I'll tend to use aux tracks. And, you know, for these, I kinda use them as a way it's like another step in the chain where you can monitor if things are clipping, right? So I can see if all my vocal auxes together are clipping before they're going into the master fader. It helps me kinda monitor and control levels a little more easily. Sometimes I'll put, like, multiband compression on it, just super subtle stuff to change the balance of each instrument category really quickly. Um, Sometimes I will put on like a FabFilter Pro Q without anything changed on it really, just to monitor levels and see what's going through it, just get like a visual on it, right? Because this plugin, it gives us that visual of the frequency of balance and everything. Um, but other than that, I usually don't add much processing at all. I'll just kind of use the fader and bring it up or down by like a few dB while I'm doing that final touch on the mix. And I think that's pretty much all I do with them. I don't add very much processing, and if I do when I do add the multiband compression to it, I do very subtle moves. I don't do very dramatic moves. Any dramatic moves I would have been making would have been done earlier in the process, usually. Not every time, but usually. So that's that. But I think that's it. Those are my basic thoughts on how and why and when and where I tend to use aux tracks. Again, this is just how I personally do things. It's not like there's any one right or wrong way to do things. And I do change this depending on what I'm working on. So everything that I've said here, none of it is a hard and fast rule. We're always like, you know, dynamic approach. We're always adapting based on what we're working on and what we're learning and what we're trying and what we're experimenting with and what we're settled down with and stuff like that. So grain of salt on everything I'm saying here, but that's the general idea for how things are for me personally right now. So I hope you guys like that. Let me know what you think in the comments below. As always, like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell. I would appreciate all of that stuff. And I do have a Patreon, so it's patreon.com/CatoNoise, and my patrons get access to additional content. We have a Discord server that we're all hanging out on. So if you want to support my channel, check it out if you feel so inclined. Other than that, I come out with new videos every Wednesday, and thank you so much for hanging out. Okay. I don't know why I ran out of breath with that last bit. So I cut my finger, and then I was setting up for this, and I like accidentally I was picking something up off the ground, and I like brushed my finger against the carpet, and this I had a Band-Aid, and the Band-Aid was coming loose, so it was just all of a sudden not there between the carpet and my cut, and I literally just like cheese grated my cut across the carpet. And so now I have gaff taped my finger because that's the solution that I'm willing to do apparently. So I have a Band-Aid underneath it. So there's like a black Band-Aid here, and then there's gaff tape holding the Band-Aid on. So I have not gaff taped directly onto a cut, at least. That is a line I have not yet crossed, but like I gaff taped my finger. That's my story. Yeah. Anyway, I know a lot of the stuff in this video I've kind of mentioned in other videos here and there, but I don't think I've ever covered it all in one video. So I hope you guys, someone found that useful to have it all in one like that. But let me know if you think it's boring because it's redundant for stuff I've said before, or if like maybe you just found the channel and you found this useful. Let me know. I'm not really sure, you know, what your experience is like. So it's useful to know. And I'm not very good at reading all the analytics stuff. I kind of just make videos that I think I might find useful, and then I hope for the best. So any thoughts? Any thoughts are appreciated. All right, bye.